I was just a guide, or so they thought. But when they defiled the jungle's sacred heart, they awoke not a man, but an ancient guardian, ready to collect an impossible debt. My name is Kai, and for the last 10 years, my world has been the emerald labyrinth of this jungle and the silent stone guardians that sleep within it. To the outside world, to the people who pay a few $100s to feel adventurous for a day, I'm just a local guide. 29 years old, quiet, with a smile that doesn't quite reach my eyes, and a knowledge of the trails that seems almost instinctual. They think I do this for the money. They think this is just a job. They have no idea that I am a watchman, a warden, and this sacred ground is my charge. A duty passed down through generations, older than any map they might carry. The Hendersons were, for lack of a better word, a cliché. There was Richard, the father, a man whose pastel-colored polo shirt was stretched tight over a belly full of self-importance. He called me Chief and Buddy, in the same breath, clapping me on the shoulder as if we were old friends while simultaneously questioning every word I said. His wife, Brenda, viewed the entire jungle through the small screen of her phone, constantly asking me to stop so she could get the perfect shot for her Instagram, complaining when the humidity made her hair frizz. And their 2 teenage children, a boy and a girl, were sullen, headphone-wearing phantoms who seemed to resent every leaf, every vine, every magnificent living thing that wasn't a Wi-Fi signal. From the moment we left the village, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It's a feeling I've learned to trust. Richard scoffed when I told him to stick to the path. Relax, buddy, I was an Eagle Scout. I think I can handle a little walk in the woods. 10 minutes later, I was pulling his leg out of a patch of stinging nettles that I had explicitly warned him about. Brenda dropped a plastic water bottle and didn't even look back. I picked it up, the cheap plastic crinkling in my fist. My ancestors had walked these paths without leaving so much as a footprint, and here they were, leaving a trail of casual disrespect. How much further to this temple thing? The son, Kyle, whined, pulling out an earbud. We are close, I said, keeping my voice even. We call it the heart of the forest. Please, when we arrive, show respect. It is a place of great power, a place where the veil between worlds is thin. Richard chuckled. Spooky. I love it. Hope the pictures are worth the sweat. When we finally pushed through the last curtain of hanging vines and stepped into the clearing, even they fell silent. For a moment, before us lay the sunken altar. It wasn't grand in the way of pyramids or colosseums, but its power was immediate, ancient, and profound. A perfect circle of 7 jade-green monoliths, each about the height of a man, stood in a shallow, mossy basin. They were covered in carvings, so old the edges had been softened by 1,000 years of rain. In the center of the circle was a single, flat stone, darker than the rest. The air here was different, heavy, still, and humming with an energy that made the hairs on your arms stand up. This is it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The Whispering Stones. My people believe they are the petrified hearts of the 7 guardian spirits of this jungle. To touch them is to ask for a blessing. To harm them is to invite a curse. I looked at them, trying to convey the gravity of my words. Please do not climb on them. Do not deface them. Observe, feel, but do not interfere. Brenda immediately broke the silence. Richard, get a picture of me pretending to hold this one up. It'll be hilarious. She scurried over to the nearest monolith, ignoring my plea. Ma'am, please, I started, taking a step forward. Richard put a hand on my chest, stopping me. It wasn't a friendly gesture. Hey, calm down, pal. We paid for the tour. A few pictures aren't going to hurt your magic rocks. He then turned his attention to his son. Go on, Kyle. See if you can climb to the top of that one. Bet you can't. The knot in my stomach turned to ice. Sir, I must insist you do not, I said, my voice losing its gentle edge. This is not a playground. This is the most sacred place for my people. You are desecrating it. Richard just laughed, a loud, obnoxious sound that felt like a physical blow in the hallowed silence. Desecrating? Oh, you're one of those. It's a pile of rocks, buddy. My kid is having some fun. Lighten up. That's when it happened. As Kyle scrambled up the side of one of the smaller, more slender stones, His foot slipped on the slick moss. He flailed, grabbing for a handhold, and his weight, combined with his panicked scrambling, put too much pressure on a weathered fissure near the stone's base. There was a sound I will never forget. Not a loud crack, but a deep, sickening groan, like an old bone breaking. The monolith, which had stood for centuries, tilted. It seemed to hang in the air for an impossible second, a silent accusation, before it toppled over and struck the central altar stone. The impact shattered the top third of the monolith into a dozen pieces. The sound echoed through the clearing, not like thunder, but like a final, drawn-out sigh. And then silence. A profound, unnatural quiet fell over the entire jungle. The cicadas stopped buzzing. The birds stopped singing. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, staring in horror at the violation. The Hendersons froze, their cocky smiles gone, replaced by wide-eyed shock. Brenda's phone was still in her hand, pointed at the destruction. Richard stared, his mouth slightly agape. "Oh," he said, the single word utterly inadequate. "Well, I guess it wasn't as sturdy as it looked. I didn't look at the broken stone. I couldn't bear to. Instead, I looked at him. I let all the patience, all the forced politeness, all the quiet humility I had shown them fall away from me like a mask. The jungle, which had been utterly silent, suddenly seemed to listen. Richard's smug expression faltered as he met my gaze. He looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time all day, and whatever he saw there made the color drain from his face, because the humble 29-year-old guide he'd been mocking for the last 3 hours was gone. The chieftain of the Cayenne people, the hereditary guardian of the Whispering Stones, was looking back at him, and I slowly, deliberately raised my hand, not in anger, but as a signal. From the deep, silent shadows of the jungle canopy all around us, a dozen figures began to detach themselves from the trees. The figures moved with a liquid silence that was utterly alien to the clumsy crashing of the Hendersons. They were lean, powerful men and women, their skin adorned with subtle patterns of clay and ash that made them seem part of the forest itself. They carried no guns, only elegantly simple spears and long, curved knives sheathed at their hips. Their faces were impassive, their eyes dark and ancient, and as they formed a loose, inescapable circle around us, not a single one of them looked at the terrified family. Their entire focus, their collective grief and anger, was directed at the fractured monolith on the ground. Richard Henderson took a stumbling step back, his face a mask of disbelief and rapidly dawning terror. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold on a minute. What is this? What the hell is going on here?" His voice, which had been so full of booming confidence just moments before, was now a reedy, panicked squeak. I turned my full attention to him, letting the silence stretch until it was as taut as a bowstring. "This," I said, my voice low and cold, utterly devoid of the friendly guide he thought he knew, "is my family. These are my people. And this," I gestured to the broken clearing, "is our church, our courthouse, and our home. A home you have just defiled." Brenda let out a small, choked sob, finally lowering her phone. "It was an accident," she pleaded, looking from me to the silent figures encircling them. "He didn't mean it. We're so sorry. We'll pay for it. Richard, tell him we'll pay for it." Richard seized on the idea, his wallet now his only conceivable weapon. "That's right. An accident. Look, we're very sorry. It's obviously very old. I'll write you a check right now. For the repairs. Whatever it costs. $10,000? 20. Just name your price." A bitter laugh almost escaped me. I held it back, letting the insult of his offer hang in the thick, humid air. Two of my people, a man and a woman, moved forward. They ignored the Hendersons completely. They knelt by the shattered pieces of the Whispering Stone, their movements slow and full of reverence. They touched the broken edges with their fingertips, as if trying to soothe the living creature's pain. The woman began to hum a low, mournful tune, a melody so full of sorrow it felt like a physical weight. "Your price," I repeated, the words tasting like poison. "You stand on the bones of my ancestors. You break the heart of a guardian spirit that has protected this valley for 1,000 years, and you ask me for a price." I took a step toward him, and for the first time in his life, I could see that Richard Henderson felt truly small, truly powerless. "There is no price. There is only a debt, and it must be paid. This is crazy, Kyle, the son, stammered, his face pale with guilt. You can't do this. We're American citizens. You can't just hold us here. As if on cue, another of my men, tall and broad-shouldered, walked calmly toward Brenda. She flinched as he approached, but he didn't touch her. He simply held out his hand. His eyes were not unkind, but they held an absolute unyielding command. Trembling, she placed her phone in his palm. He gave a slight nod, and then did the same to Kyle, and then to his sister, who gave up her own device without a word. Finally, he stood before Richard. "Give it to him," I ordered. "Your connection to that world is over." Richard hesitated, his phone a lifeline he couldn't bear to lose. "This is kidnapping. The embassy will hear about this. They'll send soldiers." "There is no signal here," I said flatly. "There are no roads. No one is coming for you. The forest does not give up its secrets easily. And now, it will not give you up either." I watched as the last ounces of his blustering defiance drained away, replaced by the stark, primal fear of a man completely and utterly lost. He surrendered his phone. The warrior collected the 4 devices and, with a single powerful motion, crushed them all against the unblemished surface of a nearby monolith. The sound of cracking glass and plastic was obscenely loud in the sacred quiet. Now the panic was real. The 4 of them huddled together, a tiny, terrified island in a sea of silent, watchful guardians. The 2 elders had gathered the smaller stone fragments, wrapping them carefully in large leaves they'd plucked from the forest floor. They handled each piece like it was a part of a broken child. I walked over to the main, toppled section of the monolith. I ran my hand over the fresh, sharp break. I could feel a faint, lingering warmth, a dying vibration. A profound sadness washed over me, an anger so deep it felt like it was coming from the earth itself, up through the soles of my feet. I picked up a hand-sized piece of the jade-green stone, its weight a comfort and a burden in my palm. I turned back to the Hendersons. Richard looked at the piece of stone in my hand, then at my face, and his eyes widened, as if he finally understood he was not in a negotiation, but a sentencing. "According to the laws of my people," I began, my voice ringing with an authority that had been passed down through countless generations, "the balance must always be restored. That which is taken must be given back. That which is broken must be made whole again." I held up the stone fragment for them all to see. This stone gave its strength, its spirit, to protect this place. It stood for 1,000 rains, 1,000 suns. It was a guardian. Now, its watch is over. I paused, letting the finality of the words sink in. "And you will take its place." I gave a sharp, clipped order in the Kayan tongue. 2 of my men stepped forward, no longer looking at the broken altar, but directly at the family. In their hands they carried coils of thick, hand-woven vine rope. Panic erupted. It was no longer the quiet, wide-eyed fear of a moment ago. It was a raw, primal screaming. Brenda shrieked, a high, piercing sound that made the birds in the canopy startle and take flight. Richard bellowed, a wordless roar of outrage and terror, pushing his wife and daughter behind him as if his flimsy polo shirt could ward off the inevitable. "Get away from us! Don't you touch them! Don't you dare touch my family!" My people didn't flinch. They moved with the deliberate, unhurried certainty of a river current. There was no aggression in their movements, no malice, just an inexorable purpose. 2 men approached Richard. He swung a clumsy fist, a desperate, pathetic gesture that one of them deflected with an almost casual flick of his forearm. In a single, fluid motion, they had his arms pinned behind his back. He struggled, his face turning a blotchy red, but it was like wrestling with the roots of an ancient tree. He was completely overpowered. "Dad!" Kyle screamed, a surge of adrenaline momentarily overcoming his fear. He lunged forward to help his father, but the tall warrior who had crushed their phones simply stepped into his path. He didn't raise a hand. He just stood there, an immovable wall of muscle and resolve. Kyle crashed into him and stumbled back as if he'd hit solid rock. The message was clear. There would be no resistance. The 2 women of my tribe approached Brenda and her daughter. Brenda was weeping hysterically, clutching her daughter, who was frozen in silent shock. "Please," Brenda sobbed, her words barely coherent. "Please don't hurt them. Take me. Do whatever you want to me, but please let my children go." One of the women, an elder with lines on her face as deep as the carvings on the stones, spoke for the first time. Her voice was surprisingly soft, yet it cut through the chaos like a sharp blade. "We do not hurt children," she said, in accented but clear English. "We teach them. The lesson is for the whole family." With surprising gentleness, they separated mother and daughter, their touch firm, but not violent. They began binding their wrists with the vine ropes, their knots swift and efficient. They tied Richard first, securing his hands tightly behind his back. Then they did the same to Kyle, who had stopped struggling and was now just trembling, tears streaming down his face. Then Brenda and her daughter. Within minutes the four of them stood in a line, bound and defeated, their vacation tans looking pale and sickly in the dappled jungle light. The only sounds were Brenda's ragged sobs and the rustle of leaves as my people moved around them. What are you going to do to us?" Richard asked, his voice hoarse, all the fight gone out of him. He was no longer a CEO, no longer an Eagle Scout, no longer a tourist demanding his money's worth. He was just a terrified man, stripped of all his power, facing a justice he couldn't comprehend or buy his way out of. "I told you," I said, stepping in front of him. I still held the piece of broken monolith in my hand, its weight a constant reminder of their crime. "You will restore the balance. You will take the Guardian's place." I gave another command in my native tongue. 4 of my people went to the remaining 6 upright monoliths. They began to unearth something from the base of each stone, pulling away thick blankets of moss and soil. Richard's eyes followed their movements, his breathing growing more frantic. They revealed heavy, dark wooden yokes, intricately carved with the same symbols that adorned the stones. Shackles, weathered by time, were attached to them by thick chains. They were ancient, clearly designed to hold something, or someone, at the foot of each monolith. "This is insane," Richard whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. "This is barbaric. You're going to chain us to these rocks." "No," I said, turning to look him directly in the eye. "That would be too easy. A punishment without purpose is just vengeance, and we are not vengeful people. We are people of balance." I walked over to the largest fragment of the fallen monolith, the heavy base that still lay partially embedded in the earth. "The guardian spirit is broken. Its body lies here, wounded and inert. It cannot be healed, not by us. It can only be reborn. And that requires a great sacrifice, a great labor." I looked back at the 4 bound tourists. Their faces were a mixture of confusion and abject horror. "The heart of the new guardian must be found," I explained, my voice echoing slightly in the unnaturally quiet clearing. "It lies deep within the mountain, in the belly of the earth. A new stone, a living stone. And you," I said, my gaze sweeping across each of them, "will bring it here." The full weight of my words finally crashed down upon them. They weren't just being held captive. This wasn't a simple ransom situation. They were being sentenced to hard labor in a place that was as alien to them as the surface of the moon. Brenda stared at her manicured nails, her soft hands, and a fresh wave of despair washed over her. "We can't," she whimpered. "We don't know how. We'll die." "You will learn," I stated, my voice leaving no room for argument. "You will learn to work. You will learn to sweat. You will learn to feel the weight of your actions, not in your wallets, but in your bones. You will learn respect, because here, in the heart of the forest, it is the only currency that matters." I motioned to my people. They began to lead the family away from the clearing of the Whispering Stones, away from the scene of their crime, deeper into the jungle. The path they took was not one I had shown them on the tour. It was narrower, steeper, and veiled in shadow. As they were led away, Richard twisted his head around to look back at me, his eyes pleading. "How long?" he cried out. "How long will this take?" I let them walk a few more paces before I answered, allowing the jungle to begin swallowing them up. I wanted the image to be seared into his mind, his family, bound and humbled, being led into a green prison of their own making. I looked at the broken pieces of the guardian stone lying at my feet, then back at his receding figure. You will quarry, shape, and haul the new stone, I called out, my voice carrying easily through the still air. You will carry it on your own backs. You will set it in this very spot, and when the work is done and the balance is restored, you will be judged. The last words hung in the air as he disappeared from view. He had asked how long it would take, but he had failed to ask the most important question. Judged by who, or by what? The next 3 months were a crucible that burned away every last shred of the Hendersons' former lives. The jungle was their workshop, their prison, and their teacher. My people did not act as cruel wardens. They were stern instructors. They showed the family how to find the quarry, a deep, echoing cavern where jade-green rock slumbered in the earth. They taught them how to read the stone's grain, how to use primitive hand tools, chisels forged by our blacksmith, heavy stone hammers to painstakingly carve out a block of the right size and shape. Every day was a torment of sweat, blisters, and aching muscles. Richard, the man who complained about a mild incline on the tourist trail, now spent 10 hours a day swinging a hammer, his soft hands quickly becoming calloused and raw. His polo shirt was shredded within a week, his pride within a day. He learned the humility of exhaustion, the profound satisfaction of a clean break in the stone. Brenda, who had recoiled from a beetle, learned to forage for edible roots alongside our women, her meticulously painted nails breaking off one by one. She learned to weave baskets for carrying food, and to make poultices for their cuts and scrapes. Kyle and his sister, who had lived their lives through screens, learned to track, to read the weather in the clouds, and to set simple snares. They learned to listen to the jungle, not as background noise, but as a language. There was no escape. They were watched but not hovered over. The jungle itself was the most effective cage. They were entirely dependent on us for survival, and they knew it. We gave them shelter, a simple hut woven from branches and leaves. We shared our food, the same humble fare of roasted yams, fish from the river, and fruits from the forest. We treated their fevers and bound their wounds. We didn't treat them as enemies, but as apprentices in a harsh, necessary craft. I saw the changes in them, slow and incremental at first, then profound. The arrogance melted away, replaced by a weary resilience. The sullenness in the children was replaced by a quiet watchfulness. They started to work together, not just as a family, but as a unit. I saw Richard help Brenda lift a heavy rock without being asked. I saw Kyle share his water with his sister, even when he was parched. They argued, they cried, they despaired, but they didn't break. They were being forged anew, just like the stone they were shaping. The hardest part was the hauling. Using a sled made of woven vines and heavy logs, they had to drag the monolith, a massive rectangular block of raw stone weighing hundreds of pounds up from the quarry and through the dense, unforgiving jungle. It was a journey of only a few miles, but it took them weeks. Every inch was a battle against mud, tangled roots, and steep inclines. They pulled together, their movements becoming synchronized, their grunts of effort a shared rhythm. They were no longer the Hendersons, a collection of 4 individuals. They were a team, bound by a singular, monumental task. The day they finally dragged the new stone into the clearing of the sunken altar, they collapsed on the ground, utterly spent. The monolith lay beside the empty space, rough-hewn and imperfect, but whole. It bore the marks of their struggle, the scrapes, the chips, the uneven surfaces. It was a testament to their labor. They stood, mud-caked and gaunt, before me and the assembled elders of my tribe. They didn't look defiant or resentful. They looked tired, but in their eyes I saw something that hadn't been there before, a deep, profound understanding. "The work is done," Richard said, his voice raspy. He didn't ask to be set free. He didn't demand to call his embassy. He simply stated a fact. He looked at the new stone, then at the broken pieces of the old one, which we had laid respectfully to one side. "We are sorry," he said, and for the first time I knew he meant it. It wasn't an apology to get him out of trouble. It was a confession. We were ignorant, arrogant. We didn't understand. I walked forward and stood before the new stone. I placed my hand upon it. It was cold, inert, just a rock. "The body is here," I said softly, "but the spirit is not. The final step is the judgment. A hush fell over the clearing. The family huddled together, their ordeal not yet over. They had paid their debt in sweat and labor, but the forest itself had the final say. I began a low, resonant chant in the Kayan tongue, a call that my ancestors had used for generations to commune with this place. The elders joined in, their voices weaving a complex harmony that seemed to make the air vibrate. As we chanted, the jungle began to respond. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves not with a whisper, but with a roar. The sky, which had been clear, began to darken as clouds gathered directly overhead. A faint greenish light began to emanate from the 6 remaining upright monoliths, pulsing in time with our chant. The Hendersons watched, their eyes wide with a fear that was no longer for their lives, but of something far older and more powerful than anything they had ever imagined. I motioned for them to step forward and place their hands on the new stone. Trembling, they obeyed. Richard, Brenda, Kyle, and his sister all pressed their palms against the rough-hewn surface. I placed my own hand over theirs, a bridge between them and the stone. I closed my eyes and focused all my will, all the intent of my people, into that single point of contact. A bolt of lightning, silent and blindingly bright, struck the central altar stone. It didn't crackle, it simply appeared, a pillar of pure energy connecting the sky to the earth for a breathtaking second. The force of it threw us all back. When we looked up, blinking the spots from our eyes, the new monolith was glowing with the same soft jade-green light as the others. The light pulsed once, twice, and then settled into a steady, gentle hum. The carvings on its surface, once rough, now seemed smoother, more defined. The stone felt alive. The clouds parted as quickly as they had come. The sun streamed into the clearing. The birds began to sing again, and the sound of the cicadas returned, louder than before. The forest had exhaled. The balance was restored. I looked at the Hendersons. They were staring at their hands, then at the glowing stone, their faces filled with awe. The lesson was complete. The next day, I led them back down the trail toward the village. They were silent, transformed. At the edge of the jungle where the modern world began, I stopped. "You are free to go," I said. "A car will be waiting in the village to take you to the city. Your story will be that you got lost and that we found you. No one will believe anything else." Richard turned to me. The arrogance was gone forever, replaced by a deep, weary respect. "Thank you," he said, the 2 words carrying the weight of the past 3 months. I simply nodded. "Go, and do not forget the lesson the jungle has taught you." They walked away without looking back, their shoulders slumped, but their steps certain. I watched them until they were out of sight, then turned back to the green labyrinth that was my home. I had not been their judge. I was merely the guide. The jungle itself, in its ancient and implacable wisdom, had been their judge, their jury, and ultimately their salvation. They had arrived as tourists, seeking a picture. They left as pilgrims, carrying the weight of a stone in their souls.